and welcome back to the first episode of Greatest Show in the Galaxy for 2023. I get it, we took a little bit of a break, but it was kind of necessary. Let me just address this up first. We suffered a bit of a tragedy, a major tragedy on this channel. A very, very good friend of ours, Ben Rayner, had passed away right at the very end of last year, and so all of us, we kind of had to take a few days off, a few weeks off for some of us, to just process this. And yeah, it's been a rough way to start the year, but the show must go on, as a great man from Queen once said. And this show is definitely no exception. This is my first time I'm actually doing a show since that happened. And I'm a bit nervous, but thankfully I have a very good friend of mine and a very good friend of Ben to help me get through this tough time with the debut of my show this year. Say hello to a very good friend of mine, Mr. Ryan Payne. How are you doing, Ryan? Oh, your audio's off.
Sorry, I mute my Bluetooth mic just in case I was talking in the background.
It's okay.
But I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, this is kind of a good way here because Ben Rare is also like a good friend as well. I co-hosted a show with him, Mount Schmodown, and then afterwards we were like I'd pop up when we'd always pop up on different streams either through happenstance or just through luck. But yeah, his passing too was definitely something that really hit me, and I don't know yet. It's kind of like with the Doctor when a companion loses. I don't know when that full weight is going to hit me, but it's coming. I know I'm kind of just getting like sporadic moments most of the time. But even then, on a show like with something like this with Doctor Who, which I know that Ben loved, I know we both have made references to our love of Doctor Who, and it's kind of sad too because it's like when I told you this idea, when I pitched this idea to you about companion departures, part of me was hoping that Ben would actually be on an episode discussing this with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a few companions I think he would have loved to talk about. But as you alluded to, this is a topic that you suggested to me weeks, if not months ago, and we were all ready and set to go and start recording first thing, even before the new year. And then obviously that hit us, and for a while we didn't even know if we want to do the show. But then, like, the topic is just so fitting. We're talking about companion departures as seen by the background picture behind us. So we both lost a good friend, our companion in a way, or maybe we were his companions along his journey. Never quite know, but we both felt like it was the right thing to do to continue on with the show and start with this big topic. Now, obviously, as per every episode, uh, since halfway through last year, we start off with a birthday section celebrating all the people that have had their birthdays. Now, see, here's the thing: because this episode was supposed to go live a few days ago, maybe even over a week ago, and because this is still part of my attempt to at least cover the whole year, start to finish. We are not doing all the birthdays of this week. We are doing all the birthdays for 2 weeks ago, namely from the 27th of December all the way up to the 2nd of January. And we'll cover from the 3rd of January all the way up to the 9th of January when we get to that. And then obviously, eventually we'll catch up. But starting us off on the 27th of December, we have Mr. Christopher Benjamin. He played the character of Henry Gordon Jago in the infamous Tom Baker episode, The Talons of Wang Chiang. Of course, he later came back and reprised the role of Mr. Henry Gordon Jago on Big Finish, one of the most successful Big Finish spin-off of Doctor Who ever. 14 seasons, and they only stopped doing them because his co-star Trevor Baxter passed away. Again, fitting for the theme of the episode of today's show. He did a couple of other roles in Doctor Who, but really, it's Mr. Henry Gordon Jago he's most famous for, most well known. On the 29th, we have Mackay Pfeiffer. He played the character of Rex Matheson on the uh, fourth season of Torchwood, also known as the season we do not discuss on this show. I mean, I'm just kidding. Obviously, it's just the not so favorable season of Torchwood, but it's still he was a major character in there. And from the way that season ended, it looked like he was gonna be a much bigger role, have a much bigger role in a potential Torchwood season
Yeah.
5, which of course never happened. On the 29th, this is another sad one, and this is really the one that hit me the most. Bernard Cribbins, obviously, he got his start in Doctor Who as in the second Peter Cushing movie, the Daleks Invasion Earth 2150. But then several decades later, he came back as the character Wilfred Mott in the David Tennant series, his final season, where obviously he was the guy that was responsible for the 10th Doctor's regeneration. And obviously, he did came back and shot a few scenes for the 60th anniversary alongside David Tennant and Catherine Tate. To my knowledge, they haven't removed these scenes, even though his passing sort of happened while they were filming. So we'll just have to wait and see if we ever get to see his character again one last time. And if it would be, that would be his final contribution to the world of television. Also on the 29th, this is a really interesting one, Mr. Julian Bleach, the the only, to my knowledge, the only person to play a villain in both Doctor Who, Torchwood, and the Sarah Jane Adventures. Obviously, he played the Ghost Maker in the Torchwood episode from Out of the Rain. He played the Nightmare Man in the appropriately titled The Nightmare Man episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures. And he's also Davros in the modern series. He played Davros in the David Tennant two-parter, as well as the Peter Capaldi two-parter that featured the character. On the 30th, we have Miss Vivian Opara. She played the character Tanya Adiola, I should say, in the Doctor Who spin-off show Class, and she later reprised her role in two of the Class Big Finish box sets. On January the 1st, we have Mona Hammond. She played the grandmother of Mickey Smith in the Rise of the Cybermen. That was the name of the episode. Unfortunately, she only appeared in one episode, even though she was mentioned in several other episodes. But I mean, she was a grandfather of a companion, so that's something pretty big, I should say. Also on the 1st, this is a pretty interesting one. We have Sophie Okonedo. I really hope I'm pronouncing that one correctly. She started her Doctor Who journey as playing the character Alison Cheney in the 40th anniversary special Scream of the Shalka alongside Richard E. Grant as the potential ninth Doctor. It was an animated attempt to revive the show that never actually happened. But then she later came back during the Stephen Moffat era as playing the character Liz 10, otherwise known as Queen Elizabeth X. And let's see what else. Also on the 1st, we have Dave Martin. He wrote several Doctor Who episodes, namely The Claws of Exos, The Mutants, The Three Doctors, The Sontaran Experiment, The Hand of Fear, The Invisible Enemy, Underworld, and The Armageddon Factor. And he's also credited as the original creator of K9. And finally, rounding up our list on the 2nd of January, the lovely Miss Deborah Watling, who played the character of Victoria Waterfield, a companion of the second Doctor, alongside Fraser Hines as Jamie McCrimmon. So, to the wonderful list of people we just listed off today, thank you all. We quite literally could not do this without you. So,
Agreed.
should we get into the main topic of today, sir?
I say yes, we should. I would definitely talk about some of each of these, but when it comes with companion departures and knowing with the classic era, there was a lot of companions, but so I figured we might as well just start.
Now, and like you said, there are a lot of companions in the classic era, and there were a lot of sporadically appearing companions, like halfway through a season on episode two, leaving right before the final episode. There was a lot of weird confusion. It's not like in the modern series where an actor is announced about a year before, and then they show up episode one of a season and go all the way out through the end of the full season, sometimes lasting for two and three seasons. So this definitely wasn't much of a thing in the classic series. So in order to truncate this episode a little bit and focus it, I decided we just stick on one companion per doctor, and I chose a companion that, and I think, in my opinion, made the biggest impact, and their departure from the show left the biggest impact on both the doctor and the audience. And I did not tell you which companion I chose for which doctor. That will be a surprise. But starting with the first doctor, I think the choice was pretty obvious. Susan, the doctor's granddaughter, technically speaking, the first companion, and arguably the saddest departure in the William Hartnell era, from the Daleks'
Yeah.
invasion of Earth, the original TV episode, not the Peter Cushing movie. Do you want to have something to say before we talk about the main bullet points of the departure?
No, I mean, obviously, I do want to say something. I mean, you obviously this is the best choice because even when I was going through the first Doctor, there was at least maybe like she was right there along with Barbara and Ian, and even though she didn't have the long, and even though this companion wasn't there the longest, she was only there for maybe like a short stint. But even in her departure, actor Jean Marsh, who played Sarah Kingdom, the she even though she was a short companion, when it came with companions, though she technically, in a way, she was the first companion to who got to fly, who got to travel in the TARDIS and then die while being accompanied with the Doctor. So
Well,
it kind of
it
felt,
was Katerina in the same serial, who also died in the Daleks' master plan.
yeah.
Katerina from
That was yeah. Oh, maybe
yeah,
I'm confusing them. Maybe I'm confusing the characters.
Katerina was the handmaiden from Troy, and Sarah Kingdom was from the Space Security Force. Jean Marsh. That's Jean Marsh.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I'm getting. I'm. Yeah. Like it really is a lot there. I honestly had like a notebook full of just jot down notes, companions, just to remind myself of episodes. It's like, did I see so or did I not? But either way, still, Susan is definitely, without a doubt, the top choice when it comes with companion departures for the first Doctor.
Yeah, it's arguably, in my opinion, the saddest of the William Hartnell companions. And that's saying something considering what you just said about Jean Marsh. But so obviously in the massive seven-part serial, the Dalek invasion of Earth, the Doctor and Susan do get to spend a lot of the serial together. But during the 7 episode run of that serial, she does happen to fall in love with a human freedom fighter who fought against the Daleks, named David Campbell, and she offers him several
Mhm.
times throughout the serial to join them in their travels in the TARDIS and help them and sort of come with them. And he outright refuses. He says, "No, London is my home. The Daleks destroyed it. Someone's got to rebuild it, and I just can't
Yeah.
leave. It's my home. If I won't fight for it, who will?" Quoting Simba, obviously. But then, obviously, she gives him a long hug when the Doctor, Ian, and Barbara are only in the TARDIS, and the Doctor sees that and decides to make the decision for her, locking her out of the TARDIS, and then going into his famous, iconic speech of "One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs. and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine. So it was later obviously revealed in a novel back in the 90s that the Doctor sort of felt that it was only a matter of time before the Time Lords eventually catch up to him and Susan, obviously. And when that day eventually comes, he wanted to leave Susan out of it because he knew what the Time Lords would do to him for stealing the TARDIS and running away. He wanted to keep Susan out of it, so he kept searching for potential places to drop her off, far away from the Time Lord's influence. And obviously, that was the one that he picked out for her because he already saw how much she fell in love with David. And he even says to her that during all the years that he's been taking care of her, she in turn has been taking care of him. But now she's still his grandchild. She's still his grandchild and always will be. But now she's a woman too, and he wanted her to belong somewhere and to have roots of her own. And with David, he believed that she'll be able to find those roots. Then he goes on to tell her, "Believe me, your future lies with David and not with a silly old buffer like me." So then, after the massive, this really emotional speech, the TARDIS dematerializes. There's a sort of moment of um non-realization for Susan that she tries to feel the TARDIS and make sure that he's actually really properly gone. And when she finally realizes that, she takes David by the hand and drops the TARDIS key on the floor where the TARDIS stood. Uh, so, how did this departure affect you as a viewer?
Well, before you brought up the nine novel you talked about that was adding more context to why the Doctor left her behind. Even then, when I saw this episode, I'll admit, like the whole thing of the invasion of the Daleks, the whole thing, like I didn't honestly think that Susan was going to stay with him. I thought, okay, I mean, yes, even though I knew about this speech before I watched the episode, I was going throughout this entire thing like, there's no way she'd leave him behind. And so when the moment came where she was at that moment at the crosswords to where does she want to, because it's clear she really wanted to continue traveling with their with the Doctor, with her grandfather, but also she's becoming a young woman and she's experiencing maybe what I believe for the first time was young love. So there was that, maybe it's her first love. So that strength, that power of the first love was definitely really, like, you can really feel the conflict within her watching that. And so when the Doctor made that decision for her, I was kind of upset because I'm like, and then of course the speech, it did kind of play like he's being the parental, he's being the guardian, he's making the choice for her. But I was like, come on, man, you should have at least let her make that choice. I mean, of course, watching, I'm going, Doctor did the smart thing, he's letting her walk off on her own. But then retroactively, I'm going, at least let her let her confer with him. But then I realized if he had actually let her through that door, she may have got up, even if the Doctor had tried to convince her. Because I'll be honest, as much as and I do like her, he's never been the best at convincing companions to do something. I mean, at least from my experiences, from at least the episodes I've watched, like the Aztecs in that episode, he tries to convince Barbara not to play God, but she ends up going, like, trying to change history. She ends up doing it anyway, of course, first time. But even then, I still think to myself, because the connection he had with her, my feelings was like, yeah, he was definitely going to. It was either going to be she's never going to leave, or he was going to have to make the decision for her. I didn't like those choices, those options. And you're right. The more you think about it, it is sad, and it was something that had to be done because neither of them was going to be able to move on and grow.
Mm-hmm.
Especially Susan. She had continued to stay with the Doctor. Like, yeah, maybe she would have been caught up with the Doctor by the time the Time Lords returned, and they could have displaced her somewhere else or sent her back to Gallifrey, or she could have died in another adventure. I think the Doctor, he did this one thing to where, you know what, she needs to grow. She needs to, like every young person, make their mistakes, be able to really become a full fledged person. Of course, the knowledge she has being with the Doctor, the knowledge of her being a time lady, and of course, just her knowledge of history itself, I think she has experience enough to know when to stand up, when to protect herself. I think the doctor at this point left her at a moment to where she can actually make her own path.
Yeah,
Like it's really
and
conflicting the more I'm thinking about it.
yeah, and like you said, it's if he hadn't made that decision for her, she never would have left, and there's she could have missed out on a potential love of her life in the form of David. And again, it's every time I rewatch that scene. And full disclosure, cards on the table, I do not like the Susan character much. I wouldn't say that I hate her. She's not in my least favorite companions list, but she's not a character I look very fondly on, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. That being said,
Yeah.
that moment is one of my favorite moments in the show of all time, and it's the realization that, again, with the doctor being her grandfather, her guardian in a way, it's that moment of realization of knowing when it's time for the chicks to leave the nest. And it's always hard. It's always hard when it's time for the little ones to go and fly in a way and live their own lives. And the hardest part about being a parent is knowing when to let go. And I think the doctor does that pretty beautifully. And of course, later episodes and later contexts would show that this doctor especially, does not like saying goodbye. He, as Stephen Moffat puts it, he doesn't like endings. He doesn't really handle goodbye very well. But so this moment of emotional maturity for this doctor, who, even though he's an old man, is still relatively young compared to the other doctors. So the moment of emotional
Yeah.
maturity out of him is was really telling. And you can tell that there's inner conflict within him, that he's crying on the inside, that he has to let his little one go. And it's made even sadder with when you watch An Adventure in Space and Time and realize that it wasn't
Yeah.
just the doctor saying goodbye to Susan, it was William Hartnell saying goodbye to Carol Ann Ford, which just adds
Yeah.
another layer of sadness on top of it. And my opinion, it's not my favorite departure from the list we're about to talk about. Definitely not my favorite departure from the show ever, but it is definitely in the later half, the one of the top ones as far as the best well made companion departures in the show.
I I do agree with you on those counts. Although I am not surprised about Susan not being a favorite companion, because even when I did my research, I looked. Yes, Susan, the character of Susan really wasn't liked amongst the big audience because of
She was
how her character
very,
came off.
yeah, she's very whiny a lot of the times, and she screams your ears off
Yeah.
a
And of
lot of the
course,
time.
watching something like Adventure in Space and Time, getting that little sent back into time of television, and especially looking at television was like for my when I took a media literacy class and a film study class, we were studying television and we saw mainly of the tropes that was always used. It didn't surprise me that someone like Susan was always coming off as a bratty child or someone who just refused to really like heed advice. So I think in a way, yeah, I can see why Susan wasn't like that much, but but for me watching her, I'm like, yeah, this is a woman who has intelligence, who knows more about history than her actual professors, but she's still a kid. I mean, she's still young. She's still gonna have that. She's still gonna have that energy of, oh, I'm in a time machine. No harm's gonna come to me because I'm in an event that already happened. But throughout their travels with the doctor, it should have been something of her realizing, like there should have. I mean, like most of the first Doctor's episodes was erased, but in the episodes I would watch, there should have been moments with Susan to where she comes to the realization that yes, this event has already happened, but that doesn't guarantee I'm safe. You know, like it should have been for her to realize that. I mean, Barbara, of course, as I mentioned, the aspect, she had her moment of realizing she can't change history, or at least a fixed moment of history. But for Barbara, it should have been. I've been traveling with my grandfather for a while now, Who knows how many adventures they had before an unearthly child? So there should have been this sense for her to realize that I'm not going to be safe. I can't guarantee that I'm always going to come out unscathed. So I'm guessing it's a lot more sense with the Dalek invasion, where she is meeting with Luke, and how and I really respected his, like, not just his determination, not it's not no his determination to stay home and rebuild what was lost. And I think some of that rubbed off on Susan for her to realize why, which helped add to that confliction, not just of a new love, but someone who has such a stubbornism, kind of like the Doctor, but it's also backed with purpose as well. Because while the Doctor, yes, he goes, yeah, they're from a home, but as you mentioned, he stole a time machine to run away. Luke, he's at a home that's been
David.
destroyed, ravaged, and people enslaved by aliens. So not only does he have the strength to fight back to reclaim his home, but he doesn't want to just be like, okay, the fighting's done. What now? He knows what he wants now. So I think because of that, it gave Susan this kind of sense to where he knows what he wants to do for his life. So I can see how she got that also added to her falling in love with him. So it did. So it really does rewatching that scene and with some and adding an extra context, it does give this idea that Susan, for the first time, did not know what she wanted for her life. Like, she could have continued wandering aimlessly with the Doctor and the TARDIS, like it's been heavily glorified in the modern Doctor Who with many companions. They don't know what to do with their lives, so they figured, oh, I'm going to travel with the Doctor going through time. But it's one of these rare moments of not just emotional maturity from William Hartnell, but it's a sense of maturity from Susan as well, for her to realize there's got to be more to my life.
Yeah. And also, it's David, not Luke. So I don't know where you
I'm
pulled
sorry.
Luke from.
Oh my
That's
god!
okay.
Oh.
I didn't want to. I didn't want to interrupt you. You were you were monologuing so beautifully. I didn't want to interrupt you in the middle of it. But yeah. So should we move on to the second Doctor now?
Yeah, let's definitely move on. We had a good enough time with William Hartnell.
Yeah. And may he rest in peace. Now, for the second Doctor, I think the choice of which companion to choose is blatantly obvious. And it's a double whammy because it's two companions, Jamie and Zoe, from Patrick Jarkman's final episode, The War Games. Obviously, after the massive 10-part serial that was The War Games, they spent pretty much the majority of the final part of that serial trying to run away from the Time Lords, but eventually the Time Lords catch up to them. They pull the TARDIS back to Gallifrey, even though it wasn't really named Gallifrey at the time. They put the Doctor on trial right after trialing the warlords and erasing them from ever having existed. And then part of the Doctor's trial was that he would be exiled to Earth and have his appearance change and all that. And a big part of that his sentence was that both of his companions would be returned to their proper place in time right after meeting the Doctor, and they will only remember meeting him for the first time, but not any of the adventures that they've had since. So the Doctor heartbreakingly has to say goodbye to both Jamie and Zoe, pretending like everything's going to be fine, even though he knew what was coming, and they didn't, because the Time Lords are assholes, and they didn't bother to tell them before doing that. But yeah, as soon as they both get in a TARDIS and leave, he turns to one of the Time Lords and he's like, "They're gonna forget me, right?" Yep, of course. So yeah, obviously Jamie was returned to his time as a Highlander. Zoe was returned to the space wheel in the far future of the year 2000, and bringing some Big Finish lore into this. It's later then revealed that they could never ever possibly remember the Doctor, even if the Doctor does eventually go back and meet them again. Their memories of the Doctor have been erased permanently by the Time Lords. The Time Lords were very, very thorough. So even though there was some adventures that featured the sixth Doctor and Jamie and Zoe, and Jamie did actually return in the Two Doctors, as soon as he was those adventures were over, the Time Lords brought him back, or they took him back to his proper time and the memories of him of the doctor faded from his memory again. So it's one of the saddest ones because that's permanent. Now we could bring in the fact that Donna had her memories wiped as well, but since she's coming back in the 60th, one could assume there's gonna be some sort of a fix to where the doctor could
Yeah,
restore her memories without her burning up. Not with these guys.
it could
That
also be.
cannot ever be.
I'll also
Go ahead.
add that with Donna returning, it can also be a way of justifying why David Tennant regenerated from Jodie Whittaker as being the 14th Doctor. You know, like kind of like how when Capaldi regenerated from Matt Smith in Deep Breath, there was that little question he kept asking myself, why did I choose this face? And then it came to fruition with the girl who lived, no, the girl who
Girl
died,
who
to
died.
where it was yeah, the girl who died. It was a reminder from his adventure from the fires of Pompeii that he chose to face of someone to help remember to who he is at his core, or or should I say, who they are at their core, because if talking any gender, they're not single. They're not single gender. But that's just my little tidbit there. But even then, with David Tennant being the 14th Doctor, this could be a way of maybe, yeah, fixing a wrong that was done, and the universe is kind of like, maybe the universe kind of pushed this face to come back to be like, as much as your intention was to save this person, you did wrong them. So maybe you try to set it right. Because even after, because in the Jury's End, what happened after he erased Donna's memories? He was on his own, became the Time Lord victorious, nearly destroyed. Well, not destroyed, but nearly what he could do with time. And then afterward, we got the end of time.
Yeah. So, yeah, the universe does make these comebacks at people sometimes, especially with the Doctor. But
But
going back
I
to
will.
Jamie and Joy for a minute.
Yes.
No, it's just we spent all this time talking about Donna. There's like what
No, no. As I said, when you say going back to Jamie, I'm like, yes, let's go back. I'm sorry. I should not just say one word and just be like, oh, what's next? Like, yes, let's do go back to Jamie and Zoe.
so I think I said my piece about them when I brought up the big finish stuff, uh, which makes this even sadder. What do you have to say about this departure of these two iconic legendary companions?
It really is a sad departure because Jamie, with his energy, I liked how Jamie still stands as one of the companions, a great example of a companion who's not from modern times. You can still pluck someone from time, from the past, introduce them to this world, and can show them technology. You can show them things that's beyond their imagination. They can still have value, even if they're from a primitive time of guns and swords and wooden carts and stone. Like they can still have value in whatever era or whatever century they end up landing themselves in. They can still grow, they can adapt, they can still be capable of doing what can be asked of them. And one thing I liked about Jamie was that he wasn't just a warrior, he was also someone that was loyal. And I love the loyalty he showed to Patrick Troughton's doctor, especially how they gelled and become great friends, which is why I like seeing him again in the Two Doctors with Colin Baker, because he's such a beloved companion that it was exciting to see him back, even though the actor was older. Same with Troughton, it was still great just to see Jamie on screen again. And Zoe, I also like that too. Like once again, a companion from another time, from the future, and not who can not only match, maybe not match with the doctor, but can be able to keep up with him and understand him when he is trying to make solve solutions and can add to it. I mean, yeah, Jimmy being from the past, he couldn't understand much of the science technology, but he at least was there to keep up with the doctor in terms of wit and and physicality. So I like
Yeah,
that both of them have a great balance. So when it was at that point where the doctor really was lying to them, saying that and also when he says to Zoe, "I will see you again," and then of course, that drop of the line, I'm going, oh, that sounds exactly like what an adult would say to a child. And that's one thing with the classic era of Doctor Who, with especially companion departures. I really think it's kind of missed on modern Who. Sure, yes, everyone says the Doctor acts a lot like a child, but that's not true. He acts childish because if we know in the modern era, he has a reason for being childish. In classic Who, he was a grown up through and through. He was someone who chose to be childish because, he can. Not because of some tragedy or some pain he's hiding. He did that because he can, because
Um, I think you're frozen. Ryan? Ryan, can you hear me? Um, yep, he froze. So I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try and message him on the private chat. Hold on.
hello.
Hey, you're back. You're back.
Oh, this wouldn't be a simple show if my camera didn't freeze.
Hey, welcome to the Northern Entertainment Group.
But I think when I froze, where was I at exactly? As I was talking about their departure, right?
Yeah, about the Doctor being childish.
Okay, yeah. I'm just gonna quickly just say, yeah, the Doctor may have been childish, especially as the clown. Like everyone say, Patrick Allen's the clown Doctor. Well, that was because I liked that about him because it didn't just hide his intelligence. It was strategic. It's kind of like what Tom Baker did earlier on with playing the fool. People will underestimate you, so they won't exactly know what you're up to. So it
Yeah,
definitely helped with Troughton, and it definitely made him likable to someone like Jamie and Zoe. So when that moment in the war game, especially when he is talking about his people, I really did feel the fear and dread the moment they were caught, where I'm going to be, oh, what's going to happen to all three of them? And when the timelines, of course, were being like, your punishment to Jamie and Zoe, you're just going back to your time. You can't ever meet the Doctor again. I'm like, okay, that does seem fit. That's like that they're getting off light, like compared to what's going to happen to the Doctor. And then, of course, when he does drop that line, they're not going to remember me. I'm going, oh, now I can see why the Doctor didn't trust, why he feared them. These guys, they don't give you the fine print. Ugh. And
yeah,
then, learning that they will never remember him afterwards, that even if by some miracle the Fraser Hines who plays Jamie, he comes back, it's just going to be a different Doctor he meets. It ain't going to be the same one. I mean, of course, Patrick Troughton is gone, but even if you did bring another actor to be the second Doctor, kind of like they did with David Bradley as William Hartnell's Doctor, it's still not gonna it's still not gonna matter because he just won't remember him or
yeah.
them.
And he can't ever remember because of the Time Lords.
Ugh.
Freaking
And
Time Lords.
it's the thing that's soul crushing to where but I also but it's soul crushing, but it's that kind of good soul crushing because it goes to show you that there is consequences when you travel in time and interfere with events that should not be interfered with. I mean, no offense, the warlords, they had to be stopped, obviously.
Yeah,
And of course, the Doctor bringing this to the attention of the Time Lords who have mastery of time made sense. But of course, it's the cost of it, which sucks.
yeah. There's always consequences whenever the Time Lords are concerned. Now, and you said about the Doctor being childish. Look who he had to regenerate from. So of course he would want to go a more childish route. But speaking of a Doctor who is definitely not childish at times, uh, the third Doctor, John Pertwee. Now, John Pertwee had three main companions and one and three companions who weren't technically speaking companions per se, but they were around his general
Yeah,
area.
yeah, like with him being
And
part of unit. Yeah,
so it was really, really tough to choose which companion departure to choose from. But eventually, I went with one of my favorite companion departures and a really, really great companion, in my opinion, overall, Josephine Grant.
oh
Obviously, in
yeah,
the episode "The Green Death," the episode itself is pretty so and so, in my opinion. But that final scene when she finally decides to marry Clifford Jones, who, by the way, Katie Manning and him weren't actually married in real life at the time.
yeah.
So that's pretty interesting to note. But they finally decide to she finally decides to leave Unit and get married to him, and they travel around the globe, saving the planet from one country to the next. And the Doctor gives her a parting gift, the blue crystal from the Metabulus 3, which she then obviously returns to him and his final episode, Planet of the Spiders. But then, while everybody's at their home celebrating with all the unit people and all the Clifford's friends and everybody, they're all celebrating and singing. And the Doctor just stands in the corner,
Mm.
drinks one glass of champagne, and then while everybody's distracted with the party, he just very quietly exits, leaves, and Joe just turns around to see him, to look at him one last time. He then leaves out of the home, gets back into Bessie, and just drives away in with the sunset in the background, and it's just such a beautiful moment. The
Yeah,
cinematography, the emotion, the music, or rather lack thereof, and just the composition of that scene is so incredible. I love it. It's one of my favorites. So much so that Stephen Moffat inserted that scene into one of the seasons of Sherlock that he did, with Sherlock exiting from Watson's wedding. Like,
yes,
what
he
shot
did.
for shot recreation, but that was more or less what he did in that season. So yeah, obviously Stephen Moffat, massive Doctor Who fan, and he was in charge of both Doctor Who and Sherlock at the time. So why wouldn't he put that in there? But yeah, this is what I was. This is something that I was searching for earlier, and this is what I was stalling for time.
What's wrong with being childish? I like being childish.
So yeah,
Yeah, you've actually used that. You used that. You actually used that from the Doctor Who like quote quiz between me and
and
Ken.
Raiko, yeah.
Yeah, and Raiko. Yeah. But honestly, I do agree with you. That is such a beautiful moment there because once again, this is the classic era of Doctor Who to where you see the Doctor Who having some emotional maturity. Yes, he doesn't like endings, but that moment where he's just giving a quick toast. I mean, he says bye to Joe. She goes back to the party. I like the fact that they could have ended that episode right there to him just like leaning up against the wall, and they could have faded a little bit to black there. But no, they decided to be like,
They
she's
decided to
where she
pull your
belongs.
heart out of your just.
Yeah.
Uh, you okay? You froze again for a second.
What? Oh no, I was agreeing with you. Did it look like I froze?
No, no, just a blip.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was completely agreeing with you there. No, yeah, it is a pull of your heart moment, and also is something where it is like the doctor realizes that because I do like when Joe was first brought in, he clearly did not want her there because his previous companion, of course, I would, yeah, Liz. I loved even her departure. Where I mean, sure, you didn't. The actress didn't return to the show, but I liked how Bridget Lethbridge Stewart said her final words were, "You don't need someone as smart. You don't need someone intelligent. You need someone to stick around you and say yes and be awe of you." And while that's how Joe started off, I do like later on you do see the doctor not just warm up to her, but also understand her value that she brings to him. That of course with Pertwee's doctor, as much as I like his doctor, that first year for him, that first series of him being a little bit cold, standoffish, and also condescending because of his intelligence, because he's stuck on Earth, it did seem to me as if he needs someone to not just warm, not to fill out the soften him up, but to remind him why Earth is like that, why Earth is important. Because before and then, Of course, with Troughton's doctor, of course, he explains why the warlords need to be stopped and why Earth is also very important. But to him, it was kind of like in the grand scheme of things, in the larger view, with this Pertwee doctor. And I do like this. Some people didn't like how he was exiled on Earth, and they kept it like that for 3 series until finally the TARDIS back. I actually liked the fact that he was stuck there because for the first time, at least in the classic era, he had to stay. He had to be he was at a standstill where he couldn't do anything. And with Joe coming in, not only was she someone because you're learning new mysteries of the Earth, especially with when we had the introduction of the Silurians. But also, it was also Joe was there during the first introduction, the introduction of the Master of Doctor's arch nemesis. So I like the fact that Joe was there, seeing the Doctor not only battle one of his own people, but she was also someone to be not just his companion, but in a way, kind of like a small counsel to him. And
And not just the Master, but also the first time the Doctor met himself,
hmm,
in a way. And I think some of the best storylines came from that exile period of him stuck on Earth, and some of the most memorable Doctor Who villains came from that era. Obviously, you mentioned the Master. That was also the introduction of the Autons and the
yes, yeah,
Silurians and the Sea Devils and the Sontarans. All that came from Pertwee's era. I think Pertwee's era introduced more recurring and returning villains than any other Doctor's era.
yeah. I think I really can't remember. Pertwee's doctor never encountered. No, yeah, Pertwee's doctor never encountered the Daleks, did he?
He had two, no, sorry, three Dalek stories. You had
Oh,
Day of the Daleks,
oh
Planet of
wait,
the Daleks, which was also a continuation of Frontier in Space, and Death to the Daleks. But overall, Pertwee did not like the Daleks at all, one bit. That's why they didn't have a lot of stories with the Daleks during his era. And here's the funny thing: he never actually had a Cybermen story during his run. He only ever encountered the Cybermen in the Five Doctors.
yes, when he was only just a guest appearance, yeah.
Yeah,
But but one thing I did appreciate with Joe was that when she did, just like every other companion, just like with most classic era companions, she not only saw a life beyond Unit and beyond the Doctor. It wasn't something that scared her. I mean, of course, she was terrified to leave the Doctor, but it was also at the same time where she also found maturity to where she goes, you know what? This is something I want to do for the rest of my life. I would not have had to do this if I had not met you. So she's
hmm
definitely an example of a companion who not only grew with the Doctor, who not only became stronger with the Doctor, but became better because of the Doctor. And Joe should be one of the examples of a companion that many people who are new to Doctor Who, especially if you watch the modern, you should look back and watch this because she's kind of the template to whenever people say, "Oh, you become better with the Doctor." She is one of those examples.
the Doctor just elevates people, and
Hmm.
these characters elevate the Doctor in return, like Joe Grant,
Yes.
like you said, with the softening him up. Like that's not something that Liz would have done if
Yeah.
she had stayed. He needed the character of Joe Grant uh,
And
to make
make
it
it
a
more
better
too,
person.
because let's not forget. I was going to agree with you. Sorry. Let's not forget during the exile period, he kind of treated the brigadier as an underling, not as a respected equal.
Which he did later towards his run.
Yeah, that I think that's because it was that help with Joe Grant though, because he became more compassionate too, to where by the time Sarah Jane was introduced, his respect for the brigadier began to show a lot more than just having the
Like,
brigadier ask instead of like having brigadier do something and he's doing the opposite, or trying to deceive him or trying to trick him.
yeah, he no longer saw him as just the standard military type.
Yes, which also kind of hurts because I kind of wish the brigadier outside of the 3 doctors had actually, or the 5 doctors had actually traveled inside the TARDIS with him.
Yeah, but he was his place was on Earth in with Unit. I would say.
It
And
makes a lot.
obviously, Joe. Before we move on, Joe Grant did actually return in the Death of the Doctor, and she actually did meet the 11th Doctor in Sergeant Adventures.
And then she made another reappearance again in
The Power
Jodie
of the
Whittaker's
Doctor. Yes, that's right.
Power of the Doctor. Yeah,
I think she would have loved that. The character would have loved uh, a female Doctor.
yeah. I think that's kind of one of the things that does hurt with. I know we're going to talk about Jodie Whittaker later on, but that's the one thing that hurt me with her run. That I felt that she deserved not just that season of Flux, but she deserved maybe one more, maybe a couple of specials, kind of like how David Tennant got some specials.
She did
I mean,
get
the Sea
some
Devils,
specials
Sea Devils
towards
was
the end.
okay, huh?
What? Well, she did get a couple of specials in her after the Flux.
Yeah, I know Legend of the Sea Devils, but I meant a little, like maybe two more before Power of the Doctor. Because yeah, I liked her interactions with Ace and Tegan, but it was a short one. Like, like I felt the Power of the Doctor could have been maybe a serial episode, maybe like a four-parter. Personally,
Hmm.
especially
Yeah,
with the convoluted plot that happened. But you know, that is a discussion for another time.
yeah. Save that for the next episode because now we're going to talk about the fourth Doctor, who honestly had a lot of really good companion departures.
Yeah.
So it was really, really tough to pick just one. However, I decided to go with Leela of the 17 from one of my favorite episodes ever, The
Ooh.
Invasion of Time. And obviously, after helping the Doctor stop the Sontarans from invading Gallifrey, uh, during which time she fell in love with a Time Lord named Andred, she decided to stay behind on Gallifrey. So it's sort of almost a repeat of the Susan departure from a couple of years before, but this time it's instead of it's a Time Lord falling in love with a human, it's a human falling in love with a Time Lord, and
Yeah.
staying back on Gallifrey. And we see here the sad departure. The fourth Doctor trying his damnedest to hide his emotions, as the fourth Doctor was known to do, trying to hide the tears, hide the regret of having to leave one of his favorite companions behind. Two of his favorite companions, as a matter of fact, because K9
Okay.
also
Yes.
stayed behind with her. But eventually, much like he did with Susan, he realized that this was the best thing for Leela. This is what she wanted to do. This is where she wanted to stay. This is where she needed to stay. And she later stayed with Andred, with K9 watching over her. Now, again, obviously, if you pull some big Finnish lore into the mix, uh, Andred at some point regenerated and sort of had his memory jumbled, and he went undercover with someone in the CIA, the Celestial Intervention Agency, and she really didn't like the person that he became, not knowing that it was actually Andred the whole time. He was actually undercover. But when the secret came out that he was actually a double agent, she really didn't want to speak to him anymore. They just sort of mutually separated, and Leela stayed behind as the presidential bodyguard of Lord President Romana. And then obviously a lot of Gallifreyan shenanigans happened. There was the Gallifreyan Civil War, which then led to Leela and some other Time Lords traveling through the Axis, then coming back to fight the Daleks, and then obviously some stuff leading up to the Time War. And then the Time War happened, and then betrayed by the Master and displaced all throughout time. She met the War Doctor. There's so much story for Leela after leaving the Doctor, but the departure itself still is one of the most pivotal moments in that character's um, life's long and detailed life stories. So, what do we say for Leela and her departure from the TARDIS?
I'll be honest, I'm really surprised at this one. I guess because with Leela, I don't know. I guess for me that departure didn't. I guess when you were explaining it, I can definitely see now the poetry, like how the reverse it is like the role reversal, as you saw with the whole thing with Like it's reiterating, yeah, Susan and David. So now I can definitely see that, but I think even then, I don't know. I guess with Leela, I mean, from some of the episodes I've watched of her, couldn't see her justification of being part of the TARDIS though. Although I did like her introduction with the Fourth Doctor, with the 17 versus oh my god, what's the name of
The Tish.
the other what?
The Tish.
Yes, 17 in the Tesh, and I do like how while the whole thing resolved was a little weird, with the artificial intelligence having been broken, the Doctor stuck around to fix it. I get that, because even then, that story when I watched it, I'm like, wait a minute, because of course, as I came into Doctor Who with Modern Who, so I watched whatever classic episodes I get my hands on. That episode with Leela reminded me so much of the Doctor's daughter with the whole.
Mm.
So, but even then, I did like how Leela stood out from the 17, and of course, her being part with. I was surprised that even the way she became a part of the TARDIS, how Tom Baker, he really didn't stop her from going in. Like, it's kind of comedic when you look at that. Like, she just forces her way into the TARDIS, and he just goes, "Stop that! Don't go near there." Like, he's not stopping her, but he even though he didn't want her there, he's not. He's honestly not stopping her. But then I forgot the episode where it was where he introduced her, where he tells her about Time Lord dimensional technology, like which
What
box
was the
is
next
bigger.
episode after that?
Yeah, I forgot the name of the episode, but then I'm going, oh my god, it was because of her we got that great moment of the Doctor finally understanding the dimension technology, why the TARDIS is bigger on the inside, and then of course I did at least see maybe like I didn't get to see this part. I only got to see this ending episode, this scene where she leaves the Doctor. But I did see when she does go to Gallifrey with him. I don't know. Like, this is the one where I'm just like, I don't have much context of it, but from what you said, just listening to this, the role reversals, and then also the big finish, this felt to me like, man, the retcons really screwed Leela over.
The what screwed her over?
I'm sorry, I was gonna say retcons, but no, that's kind of stupid. Just more of the new lore, the big finish lore. They kind
It's
of like
not really.
screwed
It's
her
not
over.
retcon. It's just because it's adding on. It's not changing
Yeah,
the
I'm
backstory.
sorry. I was trying to think of what I was trying to think of a turn of phrase, but nothing was coming to mind here. Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of big finish to get through, but wow, I mean, learning that even some of the small, I learned about Leela that she becomes a bodyguard to Romana as Lord President, and then of course, yeah, with the War Doctor story, big finish, I did learn that she does meet him. Wow, I'm going like, what with all that lore there, especially with, oh man, I don't know. This is just one where I'm kind of like stuck on, like it kind of reached me like maybe I should have watched that episode. Maybe I should have finished that Doctor Who episode with Leela. This was more of I was gonna catch up to as many as I could, but I'm sorry. Outside of my viewer bias, I do actually like that departure just from that scene alone, especially with the Fourth Doctor. He had just had departures with Sarah Jane, uh, and then seeing how Leela, when he first met her, he kind of thought of her as a savage, someone who's only good fighting and nothing else, but who had potential to be to be better than what she was. And while that didn't change for her being a warrior, of course it didn't change because that was her whole life. But then seeing her with the Doctor, but of course seeing how the Doctor views her now, the fact that he was really hesitant to actually give her a formal goodbye, it really does show you that and the great acting from Tom Baker in that moment, and even Louis Jameson really being very reserved in that moment too, to where Leela kind of feels like she's betraying the Doctor, and I do like that where she goes, "I want to be here." It kind of feels as if she's breaking his trust or something, because it kind of feels like we all know the Doctor's feelings of not wanting to be on Gallifrey. So with her choosing to remain on Gallifrey, it does feel as if she's kind of betraying him. And while his hesitance to say goodbye to her can almost be as if he feels betrayed, but no, that performance from Tom Baker gives off so many layers, and I like that because while he may not have any warm feelings towards his people, he doesn't want to stop somebody from doing what they think they think is right, or they want what they want to do with their lives. Like that's one thing I like about Tom Baker's Doctor. He's not going to try to control people and what they do with their lives. I mean, sure, most doctors will maybe slightly push or manipulate people to a certain way, but he's never that kind of. But the Doctor is never that kind of person who go, no, you're traveling with me. I want you to stay with me. He's like, oh, you want to move on? Okay, great. If it's your choice, like there's nothing, there's no tragedy, there's nothing to push you towards this choice, and you're choosing this because that's what you want to do. Okay. I mean, that's all for that one scene, though. But I think with this, I am gonna take more opportunities to find Leela episodes to watch them, so that I can have the whole context in my head now.
Yeah, and going off of what you said earlier, going back to the Susan comparison here, he's choosing to let her follow her heart in a way and follow the person that she loves. And moving on to the fifth Doctor.
So far, the three companion choices that you picked, they've all left the Doctor for love, which is very interesting.
I did not notice that until you said that.
And so far with Susan, Joe, and Leela, they all left for love, not out of tragedy, which it's not bad. And honestly, for those who are going to be watching it, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's kind of a good thing because it's to where they found strength, not just through love, but also strength of character to want to step away from something as grand as traveling with the Doctor to actually risk for love. I actually do like that.
Yeah, and so far you said that all three of them left for love. So far we had the Jamie and Zoe who kind of left not by choice, and it was a tragedy. And let's talk about one of the greatest tragedies of them all.
Yep.
This guy.
Yep. I knew we were coming. He wasn't automatic. He wasn't automatic. This was like one of the few companions for Classic Era that I knew we were going to talk about.
Yeah, of course. You have to. Now, he wasn't the best companion. Far from it. Not even with that particular Doctor specifically. But I mean, that moment, I mean, we didn't really get that for years by the time he showed up. Decades even. So to have a companion who's been around for at least a season or so just go out with a bang, literally and figuratively, and the way his death affected the audience and the Doctor, at least for a little bit, and how that death was handled with Nissan Tegan yelling at the TARDIS monitor, screaming out his name, and just the silence of the Doctor looking at the monitor and in his head thinking like, if I had just taken him back home like he asked me to, this wouldn't have happened. And then the hard transition into this image right here with the broken star on the TARDIS floor and the credits rolling silently without the familiar Doctor Who outro. That's kind of the first and only time that's ever happened in the show's history. When a companion dies in such a way that they just leave this image on the screen and let the credits roll without the music. That whole thing is just so unique. And again, while he may not have been the best companion, definitely still to this day not the most beloved character in Doctor Who, that moment did still leave an impact on the Doctor and the companions. And it's even referenced in The Power of the Doctor by the Fifth Doctor. So this just shows you how impactful that moment was for him.
And how long it stayed with a companion, especially with the companion Tegan. Like, especially Adric's death, like even though it was a big moment, it did have lingering effects too with Tegan herself, because just like with Adric, Tegan, who was brought upon, I mean, Adric, he was kind of a stowaway onto Tom Baker's Doctor's TARDIS, but Tegan was someone who clearly did not want to be there from the beginning, and through unfortunate circumstances, has been constantly staying on the TARDIS until she finally did leave during I think it was Earth Shock. No. That's the one where Adric died. It was it was a Dalek episode. I
Resurrection of
remember.
the Daleks.
Yes, it was that final episode where she left, and it was that it's because honestly, even though Adric was the number one for Peter Capaldi's doctor, Tegan also was a second because after in that episode when the
Peter
war,
Davison.
huh?
Peter Davison.
What do I
Not
keep
Peter
saying?
Capaldi.
You know what? I'm gonna take a breath here. I'm gonna take a breath.
You're getting all your Davids mixed up today.
Yes. I think I'm getting a breath because of so much knowledge. But no, with Tegan, after that episode, especially after that battlefield with her, Davison and Nisa just walking amongst the wreckage of Daleks on Earth, you can see that it was it wasn't just the straw that broke the camel's back. It was her at a boiling point to where she just couldn't do it anymore. And I have to believe it's also because of Adric's death to where she realizes this was the second time she has come face to face with death. And she does not want to encounter that again. And so, and I do like how it reverberates back to Power of the Doctor, to where not only was Adric's death brought back up, she's in a unit building that's being surrounded by Cybermen. So of course, something like that would come back to her memory.
And she meets the Master again. And I love
Yes.
how the Master, first time he sees her, is like, "Oh, Tegan, how are you doing? How's your Auntie Vanessa? Do you keep her in a little box?"
A dollhouse. My God, what an asshole! And Passacha Duval played that so well.
And he sends her the mini doll of a Cyberman with a note saying that it's from the Doctor. Like, I mean, Sacha Dhawan's Master is an asshole to a lot of people. Great actor, but you know the character is an asshole to a lot of people.
Yes, that is true. But I will continue to say, at least with Adric, yeah, just with Earthshock, like even then when he, of course, before he was asking the doctor to go home, that moment with the Cybermen with their ship going to crash on the planet, it was something that honestly he really could have led, but it was that intellectual curiosity of his that honestly kind of made him a bit of honestly a bit annoying at times, but it was just something that was a part of him that he just could not let go, that made him turn back around to find out. And then, of course, if he had not turned back around, Cybermen would not have prevented the Doctor from rescuing Adric on the ship. And also, if it wasn't for the Cybermen, they would not have just, of course, a dying Cyberman. If he had not had, if that weapon was aimed a little higher, he would not have hit the control panel that would have had Adric to be able to prevent the ship from crashing. So, like, Adric going back into that ship was so many dominoes back then, unfortunately, that led to his death.
Yeah, it was his inner intellectual curiosity and his need to prove himself that was his downfall in the end, because he was already on an elevator to leave the ship. He was on his way to leave, and then he just walked back in, just like, because he felt like he finally found the correct sequence to input into the computer. And then when the dying Cyberman blew it up, and his final words are, "And now I'll never know if I was right."
Exactly. Course, yeah, that one. Oh.
And of course, it's good. I think in a way, it's good that the Cyberman hit the console, because that ship crashing ended up being what destroyed the dinosaur, what killed all the dinosaurs. And obviously, if we have to bring Big Finish lore into the whole thing, turns out he actually survived on prehistoric Earth for 500 years and became the leader of a cult of scorpion people. It's a whole thing. That's why I didn't want to bring it up until the very end.
I hope that lore was kind of scrubbed away, because that kind of undoes the whole thing of Adric's death.
Yeah, I mean it's a weird story, and I know it takes place in a weird storyline in and of itself. But yeah, that's why I didn't want to bring it up until the very end. But having brought that up now, after the fifth Doctor, the sixth and seventh Doctors got a little easier to choose, because they kind of only had one companion departure.
Yeah, and yeah, they're serious. And just like with Davison's Doctor, unfortunately, they didn't last long. with their
That was
runs.
the state of the BBC at the time.
Yeah, and hiring Jonathan Nathan Turner as producer, who had so much creative control.
Yeah, well, he's been around since Tom Baker's final season. Just by the time he got to the Sixth Doctor, he kind of wanted to leave, but the BBC wouldn't let him because he was the only one who could properly steer this ship,
Hmm.
and so he steered it in every which direction that he thought of at the moment. And
I will say though, Trial of the Time Lord was a good steer direction for Colin Baker's Doctor. It's just
yeah,
unfortunately because audiences kind of, it's like with everything with television. You're trying to capture your audience. Audience just wasn't vibing with them. I would have loved to have seen where Colin Baker's Doctor could have gone after Trial of the Time Lord.
yeah, it's called Big Finish. Seriously.
I meant on TV, but yeah.
Yeah, but seriously though, the Sixth Doctor Big Finish run is incredible. Like if it wasn't for the TV stuff, he would have been one of my favorite Doctors ever. Just the TV stuff really drags him down, but the audios just elevated that character so far above what the TV show could ever have done.
Yeah.
Not the least of which with his relationship with the character of Peri Brown, who, as seen in this horrifying looking image, her final departure from the TARDIS did not go quite as smoothly. She was strapped to this operating table, and she was implanted with the consciousness of a reptilian creature named Keeve. We left her looking like this. Yeah, and it kind of took over her mind. And so there have been some conflicting stuff that happened in that episode where some accounts say that she stayed like this forever. Some accounts say that the operation was unsuccessful and she actually married King Yakarnos, played by Brian Blessed, and went off to live on his world. And the Doctor just never came back for her. Now, again, putting Big Finish context into this, because it does actually, it's important for the character. Turns out the surgery did happen and it was a success. And then she did actually marry King Yakarnos and went to live on his planet. And then Keeve, controlling the body of Peri Brown, poisoned his drink and sort of ordered the Doctor to come back to the planet and try to figure out the mystery. He refused to solve the mystery before he
freed Peri.
got Peri to accept his apology. She refused because obviously it wasn't really her; it was Keeve the whole time. She locked him up in the dungeon for 5 years before she eventually decided to let him out of this cage and to go with her on this intergalactic space conference. When it was revealed to him that it was actually Keeve the whole time, and he finally managed to expel the consciousness from her brain, bringing back the original Peri, who was like in a coma this whole time. She had no idea what happened during those 5 years. It was the Peri from 5 years ago in the body of Peri from 5 years after the operation. And then after that, she continued to travel with the Sixth Doctor for a little bit. They went to the wedding of one of his other companions, Flip Jackson, and then eventually she returned to the planet for a brief spell before leaving again. And right now, her current fate in the Big Finish canon is unclear, but I felt like it was necessary to bring up that whole storyline because it directly ties into her departure. So, and also Colin Baker's acting on the TV side when he realizes that Peri is dead now because the Time Lords removed him from the timeline before he could save her. It's just heartbreaking. It's definitely one of those heartbreaking companion departures, done in no small part thanks to the acting from Colin Baker in that scene.
Yeah, the whole Peri, that was also, I mean, honestly, another obvious choice. One very complicated too, especially when you bring in the Big Finish lore. But even then, like Peri, her journey with the Doctor, I will say she had one of the more, especially the classic companions, one of the more unlucky runs. Unfortunately, she gets Peri. She's immediately,
and it gets even worse in Big Finish.
Yeah, it gets worse in Big Finish, but as I'm speaking on television, She gets paired with Peter Davidson's doctor just right after Troughton leaves, and then the case of Adric, which was Peter
Turlo.
Davidson's reaching. What?
You said Troughton.
Yeah, isn't that his name?
Turlo.
Oh.
Turlo.
There it goes again.
Troughton is
There. I thought his name was Troughton, but yeah. After Turtle leaves, there's the case of Adric, and then she has to deal. She only has one adventure, well, 1.5 adventures with Peter Davidson, with the Fifth Doctor. Then he regenerates into Colin Baker's Doctor, and then of course there was the Twin Dilemma, which left the Sixth Doctor in the midst of regeneration, nearly choking her. And that in some cases where you kind of realize what kind of companion sticks around with the Doctor after that, and then later on we get the run to where we do see Colin Baker's Doctor. He has mellowed out from being a maniac doctor, and then of course leading into where the trial of the Time Lords. Watching that run, I was always curious, like, wait, Doctor already has a new companion? What happened to Peri? And then seeing through the trial what happened, I'm going, holy what the hell?
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
Yeah, I know, wibbly wobbly, but yeah, it lets that but just like with Adric, Peri's departure led to a great lingering effect with Colin Baker, with the Sixth Doctor, where he is that great speech where he is not just accusing them, like not throwing accusations at them, but he's also yelling at them for, you guys have the power to save her. You chose not to, but instead seal her fate. And at the time where he will leave, kill her. Like, to where you're putting him on trial for something that he didn't do, but how can they as Time Lords and Time Ladies be better than the Doctor when they did something that's worse than something that he, even though he consciously would not do unless it was a last resort. So no, it's even then, and of course then afterwards when the trial's over, he's told by Mel and some other people that, no, not Mel, he's told by the Judicer, the Time Lady that's in charge, the judge.
Darkel. Inquisitor
Yes.
Darkel.
Inquisitor Darkel, yeah, he's told by her about Peri's fate, that, yeah, she's married to Brian Blessed's character. I'm going, oh, did that something the writers just did for a happy ending? But then, of course, what you're explaining the Big Finish audio, I'm going, nope, just like Leela, it just gets darker and darker for her. But I think with this one with Peri, though, I actually don't mind this darker chapter for her, because this is once again something that was out of her control, out of her choice, something she was forced into. So I do like the fact that, yeah, well, not like, but it does make for a good, interesting tale. For 5 years, her body, her mentally, she was kind of supplanted by Kiev, and I kind of like the fact when she comes back, I definitely make a note to listen to those Big Finishes with Colin Baker. I'm just getting started with Paul McGann, honestly.
Great,
but I'm definitely making note.
But especially once you get to some of the later Big Finish releases, it really kind of hits the nail on the head that despite everything that she went through with the Doctor, she still cares for him. She still loves him as a friend. There's a really great story called Plight of the Pimpernel, where after the Doctor sort of leaves, she stays behind with this space Hitler who lied and cheated his way to gaining the Doctor's favor, and she just yells at him, "You hurt my friend. No one does that." And I'm not going to spoil too much of the story, but it's a really great story, and it shows you the loyalty that this character has to the Doctor, especially considering after this happened.
Alien spy!
So yeah, one would assume that she would get up and leave after that happens, but no, she knew that he was unstable at the time, and she knew that more than anything, he needed a friend. He needed someone to center him, and that I think just makes her a better character. All for it.
And you were correct. Uh, but of course, with her first watching that with the twin dilemma, honestly, especially what happens later on with the whole assassination plot, and then of course the Doctor finally saying goodbye to his mentor. Um, I forget his name, but the one who was the
Yeah, I know. I
admiral.
know the one you're talking about. Hold
Yeah.
on. I
Well,
forget his
I'll just
name.
say Choji because that's the one I remember. That's the regeneration. That's the regenerative form I remember from Pertwee's run as the Doctor, his mentor. Yeah, the one who made the one who taught the Doctor. But seeing that, but I will admit that if I was in Perry's position after throughout the entire Twin Dilemma, I kind of would see why I'd stick around, especially when he comes back after saying goodbye to his mentor. He does look like he has finally like not mellowed out, but he's he like you said, he is centered. He now knows exactly who he is. But in any logical sense, I still would have been like 1 foot in the door and 1 foot out the door. Because at that point I'm going, somebody chokes me at that point. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter what you say to me. You kind of just really just kind of hit your last end, like your last rope with me. Because I just mentioned with Peri, she meets the Doctor through Turlo and Chameleon. Then she joins him for the case of Adrazani, to where she was hostage, like used as a hostage bait. And then when she's finally saved by Davidson's doctor, he regenerates in front of her. Like, she went through a lot through a short run of time, to where I would not have been surprised if she had left him. But no, I actually don't. It does kind of make sense that she stuck around.
Yeah. And by the way, that Time Lord's name was Asmael.
Yes.
I just looked him up. But yeah, and a character that you alluded to that started with the Sixth Doctor and continued on with the Seventh Doctor, and it's another one of those companions who just unfortunately happened to exist at a very tricky and turbulent time for the show, and another companion I think, in my opinion, did not get a fair shot like most other companions. Melanie Bush, who was obviously introduced in Sixth Doctor's story, she never actually had an on-screen introduction. It was just sort of the Doctor staring into his own future
Mm-hmm.
and uh, uh, picking out a specific time with a specific companion that he hasn't even met yet. He later,
Yeah.
of course, met her in a novel called Business Unusual, and then obviously there's a lot of just Big Finish filling in the gaps as per usual, but none of them really want to touch that first initial meeting between the Sixth Doctor and Melanie. But then obviously next time we actually get to see Melanie, we don't actually get her first introduction to the Doctor. And the show just continues on with her already having traveled with the Doctor for a while until she obviously the Sixth Doctor generates into the Seventh Doctor. She continues to travel with the Seventh Doctor for a little bit before the showrunners decided it's time to move on. And you can kind of actually see in McCoy's first season that he gets really, really close with a lot of the younger female characters, in a way, trying to pick out a proper companion to replace Mel before eventually landing on Ace, who can be seen right here in this picture right here. And obviously, she meets up with Sabalom Glitz from the Trial of the Time Lord serials, and she decides to stick around with him in his brand new ship, the Nosferatu 2. The Doctor leaves her behind with Sabalom, believing that she can make him better, that she can change him for the better. Now, obviously, putting in some Big Finish context into the story because we have to, I think, at this point. While trying to change Sabalom Glitz for the better, turns out that his life of crime ends up being a bad influence on her. She ends up falling into a lot of debt, owing so much money to so many people before Sabalom Glitz eventually jumps ship and leaves her behind, effectively leaves her for dead, making and forcing her to sort of make do with what she have. She goes on a life of crime of her own, trying to pay off all the debts that she's owed. Before eventually meeting the Seventh Doctor and Ace again, and after sort of selling him out to an intergalactic gangster known as Dud Bolton. I think that's his name, Dud Bolton. Maybe I'll look it up later. But yeah, eventually, obviously, the Doctor forgives her because of all the shenanigans he's pulled since she left, and then she just continues to travel with the Seventh Doctor and Ace for a little bit, and the monthly range of Big Finish episodes sort of ended with leaving that whole arc uh, without a proper ending, and we never actually know what happens to her character. Now, in a Blu-ray release special, it was kind of made known that she eventually went back to the time of Ice World and opened up her own fitness company. She became a business mogul. I believe the name of her company was called 24 Carats or something like that. Eventually,
Okay.
she met up with Seventh Doctor again in that special that was filmed specifically for the release of that uh, Blu-ray for season 24, hence 24 carats. And she was last seen in The Power of the Doctor, apparently on
Yeah.
Earth, in that big companions support group that was hosted by Graham. So no one knows exactly how she came back to Earth, but I mean, it's canon now that she did. So you figure it out, fans. Come on, you're smart. You figure it out.
I gotta be honest here. This is one companion, unfortunately, I did not get enough. I did not get to. I'm not familiar with. I mean, I am familiar with her through what you mentioned, the Big Finish audios, but unfortunately, when it comes to TV, she was. I never got a chance to watch her episodes. I mean, outside of Tile of the Time Lord, Trial of the Time Lord, that's all I know about her. Like even then, she didn't leave much of an impression. The only thing I know about her was that she always kept, yeah, she was making the Doctor constantly do fitness and have him drink carrot juice. That's all I remember about her, especially in the last end of the Ultimate Foe, to where his last words, just carrot juice, carrot juice, carrot juice, carrot juice. That's all I remember about Mel. Never got took the opportunity to watch Seventh Doctor, honestly. So this is one companion I'm not very familiar with, and even from the context you're given of her departure, it does kind of seem that she was kind of an afterthought.
Yeah, it was a very unfortunate thing that happened with her character. And they made a big spectacle about her being a computer programmer in the 80s before anyone knew how big computers were going to be in the next decade. But yeah, she was introduced and announced as a computer programmer, and she's never once goes near a computer at
Huh.
all. And during her time on the show, Big Finish obviously changed that, but on her show, she never once went even so much as looked at a computer monitor. And that was she. Hold on, I was up all night, so I'm a little bit slow on the Bonnie
It's
Langford.
okay, man.
Yeah, Bonnie Langford repeatedly said that was one of her main regrets, is that she never actually got to do what her character was supposed to do in the first place. She was introduced as this massively intellectual character,
Hmm.
and all she really did was just running around corridors screaming most of the time.
That's one thing I was told about. That's one thing I remember during research, or at least finding videos, was that she was hired mainly because she can do the screaming well, like someone who could do the final girl scream.
There's nothing wrong with my voice.
But yeah, so it was a rough introduction to a companion and an even rougher exit for a companion, which is unfortunate. She's not one of my favorites, definitely not from the show, but she does get she's definitely one of those characters that gets highly elevated through Big Finish, and I actually really like her Big Finish storylines, not so much her storylines on the show, but yeah, it was a pretty rough exit, unfortunately, and kind of feel even in the episode itself, it kind of feels a bit rushed, even though they gave her a full season already. But you know, it is what it is, and it's just the way the show was run during that time.
Okay, yeah. I wish I really had more to say, but I don't, because I only saw a few episodes first of with her.
Yeah.
but hopefully, if I do finally when I get the opportunity to listen to some Big Finish episodes, and I will catch up to where with Mel. Hope maybe it'll definitely give me the opportunity to get her character into a better context.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we can't really talk about Ace because her departure, technically speaking, didn't even happen on the show. And more to the point, she had several departures in several different forms of media
Huh.
and they kept bringing her back and making her leave again, and then bringing her back again. And obviously, we saw her recently in The Power of the Doctor. So it's one of those companions that never actually got a true, proper departure. Uh, Even though we've seen her more recently, I guess you could argue that Power of the Doctor is her official departure in a way.
Well,
But
I really don't see it as departure. I kind of see it as her getting closure, just like with Tegan as well. Like they got closure with the Doctor. Maybe not with even though technically it wasn't the Doctor, but it was still an artificial construct created by the Doctor of all of their personalities and memories. But Power of the Doctor, I would say, at least with Tegan and with Ace, it was something that gave them closure because in that episode, you clearly can, even though Ace was okay with the doctor, or she called the professor, it was clear in that little moment in the volcano that she still had some unresolved issues with the doctor that got resolved with her. Same with Tegan as well, because Tegan, although it's like I don't know what it is with Chris Chibnall, it's almost as if he forgot what happened, or he claims to be a Doctor Who fan, but he tends to forgot what happened with Tegan to where she ran away and not leave. Doctor didn't leave her behind; she left. But it's tit for tat and all that. But still, it's kind of things like what
yeah, I
that's
mean,
one
she
thing.
is she yeah, but she leaves, and the Doctor tries to convince her to stay. She walks away from him, and then when he and Turla go back into the TARDIS, she comes back, and then he's like, "Okay, fine." So I guess that's what he thought happened, but like I say, Chris Chibnall.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, yeah. I would say wibbly all the time. It's the wibbly wobbly of Doctor Who continuity and lore.
Yeah, but that is a story for another time. Because next week or rather next episode of this show, whenever we end up doing that one, we will be discussing the modern companion departures, uh, and yeah, definitely so much more to talk about with them. Because in the modern series, departures were a lot more structured and planned out, so they got to have their moments, as opposed to just yeah, I'm done, I'm leaving. Or do you want to be a companion? Sure, I'll be a companion. So yeah, that's what I meant earlier. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think we spent a solid amount of time talking about this. Mr. Ryan, where can the good people of the interwebs find you when you're not doing Doctor Who shows with me?
Well, currently, right now, I don't have a lot of like projects going on at this moment. But if people do want to see some stuff I have done, I mean, currently right now, I am trying to get one of my podcasts with my co-host back up in the way, so it's kind of like we had to put it on hold. So we're hoping to get back up and running this year. The podcast is called Wrestling Ramblings and Rages Podcast. Now, from that first title, it means this is a podcast about wrestling. If you're a wrestling fan out there, my co-hosts James Shimo and Brent McPherson, we all find topics to talk about wrestling, or sometimes we'll review wrestling. We'll review wrestling shows or wrestling pay-per-views. It's something for us, for the three of us, to just sit down, chat, and just talk our love and passion about wrestling. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Um, we have a lot of old. We need to record a lot in 2022, but there is at least still a few episodes that you can check out and listen. And if you enjoy it, hopefully so. Because most recently, we just did an episode regarding like some of the wrestling ups and downs, the worst of wrestling of 2022. We're hoping to do our top 5 best and worst of 2022, and then we're gonna try to get maybe not weekly episodes, but we're at least going to put out more current content. So if you guys enjoyed ourselves, you'll at least you'll at least become more familiar with our voices if you've never seen my face, and that's not counting this show.
And as for me, yeah, you can find me every Monday. Hopefully, going forward this year. Again, once we get through the clutter of the first couple of episodes of this month, I will be back every Monday on this show doing the greatest show in the galaxy. As for the fate of Northern Countdown, as mentioned earlier in the start of the show, since our good friend Ben passed away, me and Soda have sort of decided to continue meeting every once a week, but the format of the show will be different. And I guess by the time this releases, I am not sure when Soda will decide to release this, but eventually we're planning to do a big live stream for Ben to sort of help raise funding for raise money for his family and the foundation that works with the disease that he had. So I don't know if this goes before or after that live stream, but I will definitely be there. Hopefully for the full thing. I'll try my best, but me and Soda will announce what the future of Northern Countdown is going to be over there. We've already decided, but I don't want to say anything just in case this goes before we officially make the announcement over there. As for me, I also have my own YouTube channel called 50 Shades of Geek. I'm trying to do some more stuff on there now, some more Doctor Who related stuff for the moment. But at the moment, I'm still continuing with the weekly series of Doctor Who Revisited, where I go through every single episode of Doctor Who from 1963 all the way up to 2022 and review them. And that's everything I got going on for now. Obviously, the last thing I did in 2022, aside from another episode of this show, was I was on Taco's Geek Gauntlet over on his channel, Something to Talk About, as well as doing probably the last episode of Northern Rewind with Soda and the late great Ben Rayner. Continuing on, if you actually stick around on this channel, we also have, or rather, I'm assuming is going to come back eventually. Have you seen this show with Daniel and Snark, where they just talk about television every week? Maybe every week. I don't know. We're still trying to figure that out. But I think that's all I can say for now. So thank you all for watching. And as we depart this episode, speaking of companion departures, stay strong, Alonzi, and rest in peace, Ben Rayner. Goodbye, everyone.